Hey Life Groups, Joffrey Bertram here. Wanted to continue on in our Life Group Refresh videos. We've had a few of these now. Matt kind of gave us an overview of what we've been looking at in Acts 2, and then Casey Schutze gave us a look at this passage from the perspective of the people of God being a united people. Colleen Searcy then came along to give us a perspective on what does it mean to be the people of God and how are we to experience community. And this week, I wanted to look at it from the perspective of mission. What does Acts 2, 42 through 47, what does that passage tell us about the people of God and how we are to live our lives on mission? And so as we do that, I wanted to actually back up just a little bit and look at Acts 1 to set the stage just a bit for Acts 2. And so if you would look with me back to Acts 1, verses 6 through 8. Jesus has risen from the dead here, and just setting the stage for this passage here. Jesus has risen from the dead, and he's visiting with people, but he's about to ascend back into heaven. And that's where we pick it up in verse 6. So when they had come together, they asked him, "Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel?" See, Jesus was getting this question all the time, right? Throughout his ministry, he's having to squash these ideas that he's this military conqueror, and he's come along to establish Israel as the world dominator. And even after his death, and probably even more so after his death, he's getting this same idea, this same mantra from the people. But Jesus says this in verse 7. He said to them, "It is not for you to know times or seasons that the Father has fixed by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." So Jesus has completed his ministry. He's been crucified. He's been risen from the dead, and he's now about to ascend, and he's commissioning his people. He's saying, this is what you're to be about as our people. Again, they had this expectation of kind of a political kingdom, but he's saying, no, you have it wrong, and this is who you're to be. You're to be sent out as my people. And so that is Jesus commissioning his church. And then again, let's look deeper now at Acts 2, 42 through 47. There it says this: "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all, as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." As we look at this passage, I want to key in really on two phrases here. One being in verse 43, this idea that says, "Awe came upon every soul." So that's the first one. We're going to look at that in just a second. And then the second phrase that I want to really emphasize and key in on is having favor with all the people. So we see on the front end of the passage that the people of God, it could be said of them that awe came upon every soul. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like worship, right? That's worship of the people of God. They are encountering their God. They're encountering Jesus. They know who he is, and awe just comes upon their soul. You think of Isaiah in the Old Testament, Moses in the Old Testament, the disciples with Jesus, people that weren't even disciples of Jesus coming into contact with Jesus. Awe came upon their souls, and they were led to worship. And that's what we're seeing. So we have worship happening here in verse 43. And then in verse 47, we have this idea that they had favor with all the people. This gives me the idea of mission, right? If they had favor with all the people, what's the assumption? The assumption is that they actually know those people and that those people know them, right? That the people of God are interacting with those that don't know Jesus. The followers of Jesus are putting themselves out there to know those that don't follow Jesus, so that day by day numbers might be added to them who are being saved. So we have worship, all came upon every soul, and we have mission. They were having favor with all the people. And I think this speaks to just the overall idea of what the church is to be about. I wanted to actually diagram this. That's why I'm sitting in front of this board. But let me just draw this out real quick for us. You have worship here as the people of God, is what we are called to do. And we naturally do this. We ought to naturally do this as we encounter our God. And then over here we have mission. We are a people that are set on mission. We have a mantra around here that says, we have a core value, I should say, that it's sent on mission. And one of the mantras that we've attached to that is that mission exists because worship doesn't. And what that means, that's actually speaking of kind of this direction, but this passage is showing us that it also goes in this direction, right? So the people of God gather to worship their God, and naturally they're sent out on mission. They know that their God is a God for all peoples, and so they're sent out on mission. And then as they're out on mission and they're reaching people for Jesus, more and more worship happens. And it's this cycle that goes on and on and on and on in the life of the church. So mission exists because worship doesn't. And so these two ideas that we see in this passage, worship and mission, they're inextricably linked. You can't pull them apart. You can't say that the people of God are only to be a people of worship. But you also can't say that the people of God are only to be a people of mission. We're a people of both. An author that spoke of this really, really well, in my opinion, is N.T. Wright. He's a theologian and a bit of a historian as well. And he writes this, speaking of the early church, this Acts 2 church. He says, "The single most striking thing about early Christianity is its speed of growth." And you think about the early church and Jesus and his ministry, and Wright kind of goes into these details, but Jesus was an unknown. He was a complete unknown, and within 100 to 125 years of his life, the Roman Empire is having to make rules specific to his followers. So the speed of the Christian church, the early Christian church, is astonishing. Wright goes on to say this: "Why then did early Christianity spread?" He says, "Because early Christians believed that what they had found to be true was true for the whole world. The impetus to mission sprang from the very heart of their early Christian conviction." He says this missionary activity was not an addendum to a faith that was basically about something else. No. Christianity was never more itself than in the launching of the world mission. So these two ideas that we find in Acts 2, worship and mission, are inextricably linked. We can't pull them apart. It's the cycle of the church. It was the cycle in Acts 2, and it ought to be the cycle of the church even today. And so as you as a life group reflect on this passage and maybe even have some further discussion about this passage, I just want to ask you a couple of questions to consider. First of all, this idea of awe falling upon every soul. For you as an individual believer, I wanted you to take some time and maybe, if you feel comfortable, share this with your life group. But what are some activities and some rhythms maybe that you could put into place and that you have maybe had in place in the past that truly empower you to be in a place to be in awe of God? Maybe, for me, one of the things that I love to do is just to be in nature. And those times that I'm able to get out into nature, I truly have a sense of awe upon me of our living God. But what is it for you that you have done, you've experienced in the past? And maybe you'd say, I probably should be doing that more regularly so that awe would fall upon my soul and that I'd be led into worship of our God. And then the second question is this idea of having favor with all the people. Once again, the early church, they couldn't have favor with the people that they didn't know and that those people didn't know them, right? There had to be this mutual knowledge of each other. And so the question to you, the question to me is, what are the activities that we have in our lives that are ensuring that we are actually known by those that don't know Jesus? What are the things that we are doing that we're actually allowing ourselves to be known, and we are getting to know those that don't know Jesus? So that one day that the same could be said of us, that many were added to our number. Those people have to come from somewhere, and they need to be known, and we need to know them, and they need to know us. And so what are some activities that you could have in place, some rhythms you could have in place to ensure that this is true of your own life? So again, take some time as a life group and maybe discuss these two ideas as you wrap up this evening. Thanks.